Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to be here. Let's do some learning. We are on page 906. Last time we learned together, we spoke about Tuma and airplanes and Kohanim and things like that. Today we're going to pick up with Pasuk 21. This is chapter 31, Pasuk 21, Lamed Aleph, Chaf Aleph, page 906. Vayomer Elazar HaKohen El Anshe Hatzava. Remember, these are the men of the army who have come back from the battle against Midian. They've been told by Moshe Rabbeinu that they need to wait outside of the camp because they have killed people. And when you kill someone, so you become tameh. That's what we spoke about. They have to wait, undergo the process of tara, the paraduma, sprinkling on the third day, on the seventh day, and then the mikvah. Then their clothing, everything like that, the things that that's what we learned previously. Now, suddenly, out of the blue, comes Elazar Kohen Gadol. Vayomer Elazar HaKohen. Remember, Aharon has already died. So now Elazar, his son, has taken over as the Kohen Gadol. Vayomer Elazar HaKohen El Anshe Hatzava Habaim LaMilchama Zos Chukas HaTorah Asher Tziva Hashem Es Moshe. This is the law of the Torah that Hashem has commanded Moshe. What is Elazar going to be talking about? So if you look in the next few psukim, you will see we are going to get a lesson in koshering kalim, a lesson in how to take all of these utensils that they captured from Midian, the pots and the pans and the dishes and the silverware. I didn't use silverware, they ate with their hands, but whatever, and to make them kosher, to purge from them the non-kosher taste that has been absorbed into them. We're going to take a really detailed look at koshering and understanding how koshering works. We're not going to do that today because we're just getting into this topic, but that's what's coming down the road. And not only koshering, but in case you want to make sure you can invite your friends, we're going to be talking about tevilas kelim as well, because this is the source not only for the laws of koshering, but this is the source for the obligation of tevilas kelim, of immersing dishes in a mikvah. Not because of tuma. In other words, before Elazar speaks, Moshe Rabbeinu already told them, you have to immerse yourselves and your clothing and everything else that you brought back in a mikvah to remove from it tuma. But tevilas kelim has nothing to do with tuma. It has nothing to do with the fact that this pot that you just bought from TJ Maxx. They sell pots at TJ Maxx? Marshall's. I don't know. This pot that you just bought from Amazon that has never been used still has to go into the mikvah. It's not tummy. It's never been used. Still has to go into the mikvah. And we'll talk about why. We're going to learn the source here for that halacha as well. What requires tevilas kelim, the halachos of mikvaos and things like that. We'll be talking a lot about that. We have a lot of good stuff coming up, which should take us until 2025 or something like that. Okay, so let's look here. Let's try to figure out what's going on. The big issue that the Meforshim grapple with right now is who is Elazar that he is speaking up right now in the midst of all of this? Who's been talking up until now? Moshe. Moshe was the one who got angry. Why did you leave the women alive? You were sent to seek revenge. The women should have been the first ones who were killed. You brought them back. Why did you do that? Right? Moshe was the one who's been speaking to them. And now, all of a sudden, out of left field, out of the blue, comes Elazar and says, Zos chukas haTorah asher tziva Hashem es Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't say it. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't tell them what to do. Elazar needed to come along and say what was what they were supposed to do. So the Mefarshim spend a lot of time trying to understand what's going on here. There's several explanations. We're going to approach it a little bit at a time with the explanations. Rashi is going to quote the most famous explanation. We'll do that last. Okay, we're going to begin with some other explanations. We're going to start with the Torah Tamima. The Torah Tamima quotes the Gemara in Maseches Eruvin. And what does the Gemara say? Says the Gemara, Tanya Rebbe Elazar, Omer Rebbe Elazar taught, Kol hamore halacha bifnei rabo, moridin oso migidulaso. Whoever teaches a law in the presence of his teacher, whoever paskins a shaila in the presence of his rav, what happens to that person? Moridin oso migidulaso. That person is demoted from his position of authority and leadership. Now, by the way, this is only one opinion here in the Gemara in Maseches Eruvin. There's another opinion, and that is that kol hamora halacha bifnei rabo. What happens? You get killed. Who is the example of that? Who was mora halacha bifnei rabo who got killed? Nadav and Avihu, right? You remember the story that during the inauguration of the Mishkan, right? Parshas Shmini, the inauguration of the Mishkan, on the 8th day of the inauguration of the Mishkan. That 8th day was the first day of Nisan. The preceding 7 days, which were the last days of Adar, when the Mishkan was inaugurated. Every day for 7 days, Moshe Rabbeinu put up the Mishkan, brought karbanos, took the Mishkan down at night, miraculously. The 8th day, the Mishkan was left in place, and Aharon and the other Kohanim were now going to take over the ritual duties of the Mishkan. What happened on that day? By Yom HaShmini, Nadav and Avihu died. Why did they die? The Torah tells us why they died. Because they brought an Eish Zara al HaMizbeach. They brought a fire on the Mizbeach. They brought a fire to the Mizbeach that was not commanded. So exactly what Nadav and Avihu did is clear from the Psukim, but very unclear if you look at the Mefarshim. Right? What was the transgression of Nadav and Avihu that resulted in their death? One opinion is they were Mora Halacha Bifnei Rabban. What did they do? They decided to bring a fire to add to the Mizbeach, right? The Mizbeach where the fire was, right? The fire that came down from Hashem on the Mizbeach. They decided to bring a fire and to add it on to that. Nobody told them to do that, and they decided on their own. They paskind, if you will, on their own that this was the right thing to do, and therefore they brought this fire. And because they didn't ask Moshe or Aharon, they were Mora Halacha Bifnei Rabban. They paskind in the presence of their Rebbe, in the presence of their teacher. What should they have done? They should have gone to Moshe or to Aaron and said, can we do this? They didn't do that. So as a result of not doing that, what happened? They were killed. The Gemara Maseches Eruvin says, Kol hamora halacha bifnei rabo chayav misa. Here, what we're quoting, an additional part of the Gemara, it doesn't say chayav misa, but what does it say? Morid migdula. So a person is demoted from a position of authority and stature. But the Gemara also says chayav misa. Now that's not the only reason which is given for the death of Nadav and Avihu. Some say that Nadav and Avihu were killed. Why? Because they participated in the inauguration, or they participated in the avoda. They were in a state of inebriation. They had consumed alcohol, right? And as a result of that, they were officiating while inebriated. right? Never a good idea to do, right? Never a good idea to do. It's one of the reasons why, interestingly, if you think about it, we don't have Birchas Kohanim at Mincha. In the repetition of the Shemona Esrei for Mincha, we don't have Birchas Kohanim. We have it in Shacharis, we don't have it in Mincha. Why not? I mean, there's no repetition of the Amida at night, so of course we don't have it, but why don't we have it at Mincha? Because we say that Kohanim during the day, what could happen to them? They could drink wine. Right, Kohanim were not on duty all day long, right? They could drink wine, and therefore they would not be able to do Birchas Kohanim. So it's not part of Mincha. When is it part of Mincha? On a fast day. On a fast day, we say Birchas Kohanim is part of Mincha, because the idea Kohanim are fasting, so there's no chance that they would have. And on Simchas Torah, we say Birchas Kohanim, which is duchening. It's different than just saying the Birchas Kohanim. But on Simchas Torah, we duchen during Shacharis instead of Musaf. Why? Because after all the Kohanim have their aliyos, what do? They go, they make a l'chaim, they make Kiddush, right? So then we can't do Birchas Kohanim afterwards. We have to do Birchas Kohanim.
Is this the source of the saying that Gadol HaMitzvah Mishalom Mitzvah?
No.
This is
not the source for that. Different source, right? Different source. So that's another opinion. But coming back to our story here of Elazar, according to the Gemara Maseches Eruvin, what happened? Elazar was speaking out of turn here. He should not have been speaking. This was Moshe Rabbeinu's responsibility to teach Bnei Yisrael through these soldiers how to purge foreign tastes, non-kosher tastes, that have been absorbed through into cooking utensils. Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to do that. Elazar jumped in, if you will, and as a result of Elazar jumping in, what happened? He was demoted from his position of leadership. Where do we see he was demoted from his position of leadership? Where do we see that? So interestingly, the Torah Tamima says as follows. The Gemara says as follows. How do we know that? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says in Parshas Pinchas, when Elazar is appointed as Kohen Gadol, it says Vilifnei when Yehoshua is appointed in Parshas Pinchas, when Yehoshua is appointed as the successor of Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he's not going to take over until the end of Chumash, in Parshas Pinchas, Moshe Rabbeinu requests somebody, and it's what we learned, and Yehoshua is the person. It says, Vilifnei Elazar HaKohen Ya'amod. What's going to happen? That Yehoshua is going to stand before Elazar HaKohen. What does it mean Yehoshua is going to stand before Elazar HaKohen? When would the leader of the Jewish people stand before the Kohen? When he needed to ask a question of the Kohen. What do you mean he needed to ask a question of the Kohen? The Kohen wore a Choshen Mishpat, a breastplate. On this Choshen Mishpat, or inside of this Choshen Mishpat, was something called the Urim V'Tumim. This was one of the methods of divine communication. You're all familiar with the story of Eli Kohen Gadol and Chana, how Eli thought, didn't understand what Chana was doing, and he asked the Urim V'Tumim, and he misinterpreted what the Urim V'Tumim said, thought she was drunk, and the Urim V'Tumim was saying she was Ksheira, not Shikura, she was Ksheira. The Urim V'Tumim would be a divine channel of communication. So if the leader of Bnei Israel needed to know, should we go to war? David HaMelech wanted to know, should we go to war? We're not talking about a milchemes mitzvah like the state of Israel is involved in right now. As we sit here, I'm getting on my phone, notices of sirens going off in various communities in the south. Right? So just watch it happen all day long. It's an amazing thing. But this is literally a milchemes mitzvah. Right? It's a fight to defend the lives of Jews in the state of Israel. In a milchemes mitzvah, you don't have to ask the Urim V'Tumim, but in a milchemes rishus, right? Should I go? And rishus is voluntary, right? I don't know that voluntary is the correct word. In other words, what? It's a war. Correct. It's a war by choice. I'm using the word voluntary for rishus, but I'm not sure that that's the best translation. An optional war. an elective war, something like that. Not a war that's being fought to defend the state of Israel or to defend Israel or to conquer Israel. It was a war that was fought to expand the territory that Israel ruled over. It was a war that was being fought to expand the treasury of the Jewish people, whatever. Right? Those were wars. One of the reasons why wars are fought today. Look at the Ukraine. One of the reasons why wars are fought today, to expand territory, to conquer other people. So in a Melchemes Rishus, you needed to ask the Urim V'Tumim for permission. So the Torah tells us that V'lifnei Elazar HaKohen Ya'amod, that Yehoshua will stand before Elazar HaKohen and will ask him to consult with the Urim V'Tumim for permission to do whatever. And guess what? It never happened. Even though the Torah said it will happen, it never happened. The Gemara says, writes the Gemara, right? V'lifnei Elazar Kohen Ya'amod v'lo ashkechan de'itzrich leYehoshua. And we don't find anywhere in Tanakh that Yehoshua ever stood before Elazar Kohen, that Yehoshua ever needed to consult with Elazar Kohen in the Urim V'Tumim. We don't find that. So the Torah Tamima assumes, the Gemara assumes, why don't we find that? We don't find that because Elazar was demoted from his position of authority and leadership. He was still the Kohen Gadol. But this promise that he would be needed by Yehoshua was never fulfilled. Why? Because of this incident. Because, says the Gemara, because Elazar HaKohen spoke up in the presence of Moshe Rabbeinu, taught a halacha that Moshe Rabbeinu should have taught, and Elazar jumped in. As a result of that, Elazar was punished and never needed by Yehoshua to consult with the Urim V'Tumim.
Yeah, but Yehoshua's career was based on Milchemet Mitzvah, the whole conquest.
Oh, so very interestingly, so the Torah Tamima expands on this a little bit, right? And says, what does that mean? So the Torah Tamima writes. Says the Torah Tamima, let me just get it. Okay. Shahaya Asid Yehoshua la'amod lifanav, that Yehoshua was ultimately going to stand before Elazar, v'lish'ol mimenu sfei kosav, and to ask him to resolve questions that he might have had. Ulavasof lo hayat sarich lo. And in the end, what? Yehoshua had no need for Elazar HaKohen. Rashi Piresh, and Rashi explains, Sha'amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu she'yish'al Yehoshua mimenu dvar halacha. Rashi says that Yehoshua would ask from Elazar dvar halacha. What is this dvar halacha? Says the Torah Tamima, B'tzarech lomad harlashon dvar halacha lav dafka halacha mamish. We're not talking about when Rashi says Devar Halacha, when he calls something Devar Halacha, and this is a fascinating insight into Rashi, we're not talking about Dafka Halacha Mamish Be'isr Veheter. Is this permitted to do? Is this not permitted to do? That's not what Rashi was referring to. Shehare Amidazo the Irikan he be'inyan she'elos be'urim betumim. Because what we're talking about when we say that Yehoshua, when the Torah said that Yehoshua was going to stand before Elazar Kohen, it was to make use of the Urim V'Tumim. But Rashi Atzmo Kasav, and Rashi himself writes, "The she'elos iser v'heter ain't shoalim b'Urim V'Tumim." You don't ask the Urim V'Tumim if I can eat in this particular restaurant. You don't ask the Urim V'Tumim if I can rely on this hashgacha. You don't ask the Urim V'Tumim if this is permitted to do on Shabbos or not. Right? Those are halachic questions. And who do you ask halachic questions to? To poskim, to rabbis. You don't have to ask the Urim V'Tumim these halakha questions. Why? So listen to what the Torah Tamima says. You don't ask these questions. V'hatam pashut mishum delo b'shamayim. Right? Why don't you ask questions of Isser v'Heter? Why don't you ask questions of Hashgacha? Why don't you ask questions, can I do this on Shabbos or can I not do this on Shabbos? Is this permissible? Is this not permissible? Why don't we ask the Urim v'Tumim? Says the Torah to me, but because those are questions that don't belong in the realm of Shamayim anymore. Where are those questions? Who answers questions for you? You have questions. The Chachamim answer questions. The Torah itself says you go El HaShofet Asher Yeh B'Yamim Ha'im. That's the principle of halacha. Lo b'shamayim hi. I don't listen anymore to a bas kol that comes down from Shamayim and paskins that this is permissible or not permissible. This is the famous story, the famous sugya of what's called Tanur Achnai. Right? It's a famous discussion in the Gemara. It's a famous passage of a debate between Chachamim about the halachic status of a particular oven. Not talking about a Wolf or a GE or a Viking or anything like that. Talking about the ovens that they used to use in the days of the Gemara, which were basically ceramic ovens, right? They were built in a way. They were ceramic ovens built together. And whether or not it was Tameh, it was Tahor, this was a debate that went back and forth. I think it was Rabbi Yehoshua, Rabbi Shimon, back and forth. One of the Chachamim claimed, right, that it was one side and brought proofs from Shamayim, right? Let this carob tree uproot itself and move backwards. Let this channel of water flow backwards. Let there be a basko. Let the walls of the Beis Medrash fall. All of these things, and all of these things happened. And what was the psak? Lo b'shamayim, right? That the Torah is no longer in Shamayim. We don't paskin based on what Shamayim dictates. The Torah is here in this world. This idea, Lo b'shamayim, is the title of a famous book by Rabbi Eliezer Berkovitz, who talks about how we apply halacha to modern day life. Think about it, right? How we apply halacha to modern day life, especially in the state of Israel, right? How do you live in a state of Israel where you might not have a Shabbos goy, right? How do you deal with these things? Who runs the power plants? Who runs the military? Who runs the police department? How do they interface with Shabbos and with all different kinds of? It's a great book, Lo b'shamayim. I recommend it very highly to read it. Phenomenal book. Anyway, so that idea of Lo b'shamayim, says the Torah to me. You don't ask the Urim v'Tumim questions of Isser v'Heter. You don't say, is this hashgacha reliable? Lo b'shamayim. Those are not matters that belong in the realm of Shamayim anymore. Those are matters that need to be decided here on earth among Rabbanim and Poskim. And then, but what is Devar Halacha? When Rashi says Devar Halacha, what are we talking about? Ela hakavana lish'ol lo Devar Halacha bi'inyane v'hanhagos ha'olam. When Rashi says Devar Halacha, what does he mean? The way in which the world works. Kmo b'devar milchemes haaretz v'chaluksa uchdome. Right? Questions that Yehoshua might have in running the country. Questions Yehoshua might have in how to approach these battles. Not whether we should have these battles. Of course we have to have these battles. But questions about how to engage in this battle. What to do if questions arise. Those are things that the Urim v'Tumim needs to be consulted with. Ube'emes matzinu, says the Torah Tamima, and we find l'chazal shekorim gam la'agados v'yadios shonos b'shem halacha. We find that the term halacha does not have a narrow definition in Chazal to simply mean, is this permissible or is this prohibited? But rather, it has a much broader definition. The Gemara in Maseches Brachos says, Al yiftar adam mechavero ela mitoch devar halacha. That you shouldn't leave someone's presence. You shouldn't leave your friend. You shouldn't depart from your friend unless you share a devar halacha with your friend. Right? What does that mean? So the Gemara brings the example, maybe lemashal al ze inyan agadi. It talks about, sharing a medrash, sharing a thought. It's sharing a Torah thought. That's the name halacha. The word halacha is applied more than the narrow definition of mutter, right? Is something permissible or prohibited, mutter, aser, heter, and isser, but has a much broader expanse as well. When we talk about nis'alma mimenu halacha, that a person forgets a halacha, it's not just referring to a halacha in a practical manner, but referring to something broader as well. So Yehoshua should have had the opportunity to ask questions of the Urim v'Tumim represented by Elazar, but we don't have any record of it happening. Says the Gemara Maseches Eruvin, why not? Because Elazar spoke out of turn here. Elazar was Mora Halacha Bifnei Rabbo. Elazar should have allowed Moshe Rabbeinu to give over these halachos. Now, we're going to learn ultimately a reason why Elazar did not do that. And that's going to complicate our understanding of this Gemara in Maseches Eruvin. But for the time being, it works. We say that Elazar was demoted because he spoke out of turn.
Where does it say that?
What?
Where does it say he was demoted?
It doesn't say, no. So the Gemara doesn't say, the Gemara does not bring a source that he, anywhere where it says he was demoted. What the Gemara says, we know he was demoted because what the Torah said would happen, we have no record of it ever happening. The Torah said that Yehoshua would consult with him, and we have no record of Yehoshua ever consulting with him. And does that mean that Yehoshua never consulted with him? I don't know. Could be, but obviously it would have been recorded somewhere in Tanakh. And the fact that it's not recorded anywhere in Tanakh is an indication, an assumption that we make that it never happened. And why didn't it happen? It didn't happen because Elazar was demoted because he spoke out of turn. He was Mora Halacha Bifnei Rabbatina.
Could you say in defense of Elazar that he jumped in because he saw an opportunity to, that Moshe was like, didn't cover this, and maybe he should have covered it, and was that the intentions were good? I mean,
we're going to learn other opinions here as well.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, this is not the only opinion. This is one opinion, right? One opinion is that Elazar did this. He did something wrong. He was Mora Halacha Bifnei Rabbo, and he was punished as a result of that. We're going to see other opinions that perhaps suggest that that was not the case. So, for instance, this Sifri, which is the halachic medrash here on Bamidbar, says, right, V'yesh omrim, Moshe nasan lo rishus le'elazar hakohen ledaber. That what? Not that Elazar jumped in, like the Gemara Maseches Eruvin wants to say. Not that Elazar HaKohen spoke out of turn. Not that Elazar HaKohen was guilty of violating the prohibition of Mora Halacha Bifnei Rabbo. No. The Sifri offers us a different explanation. What does the Sifri say? That Moshe Dafka, another rocket attack. That Moshe Dafka what? That Moshe told Elazar to speak. You say over these laws. Why? Why would Moshe Rabbeinu do that? So listen to this. This is what the Sifri says. Shekishi yiftar Moshe min ha'olam, in order that the situation not occur, that when Moshe died, lo yihu omrim lo, people wouldn't say to Elazar, B'chaye Moshe Rabbecha lo hayasa midaber, right? Yeah, while Moshe was alive, you didn't say anything. Right? You didn't say anything. Achshav ma tamidaber, now we should listen to you. In other words, if indeed Elazar had not spoken, this is what the Sifri suggests. If indeed Elazar had not spoken, what might have possibly happened? It could have been that when Elazar did speak, meaning when Moshe Rabbeinu died, and Elazar, who was leading now the Jewish people as the Kohen, together with Yehoshua, when Elazar would speak, what would the people say? They would say, guess what? While Moshe Rabbeinu was alive, you didn't say anything. While Moshe Rabbeinu was alive, you had, no backbone, right? You weren't willing to speak. And now Moshe Rabbeinu is dead, and we should listen to you, right? We should listen. You're going to take now a position of authority. You never did it while Moshe Rabbeinu was alive. So says the Sifri that what? Says the Sifri that Moshe Rabbeinu said to Elazar, you give over the laws of kashrus. So that people shouldn't think that you didn't speak while I was alive because you lacked authority. People shouldn't think that. So Dafka, I want you now to speak. It's a completely different interpretation than the Gemara gives. Now, which came first, Sifri or the Gemara?
I don't know.
This, right? Not so sure. Right? Not so sure. Probably of contemporary origin. Right? That the Gemara and the Sifri, I don't know which came first. But clearly two different opinions. Right? The Gemara quotes one opinion, holding Elazar responsible for doing something wrong and talking about how he was punished. And the Sifri says, no, just the opposite. The Sifri says he did the right thing and Moshe Rabbeinu wanted him to do this. Okay? So those two opinions. Now we come to a third opinion. Right? This is the third opinion. This is the opinion that Rashi quotes. It's the opinion that's also mentioned in the Sifri, and it's actually an opinion that's mentioned in a different Gemara about what we have here. Again, it is all motivated. These discussions are all motivated by the fact that Elazar seems to jump in here. So we'll start with the Sifri, then we'll see the Gemara, and ultimately we'll come to Rashi, who's quoting the Sifri. So what does the Sifri say? The Sifri says, Rabbi Elazar Omer. Rabbi Elazar says, Begimel Mekomos, in 3 places, Ba lichlal Ka'as, Uva lichlal Ta'us. In 3 places, Moshe became angry, and as a result of that anger, made a mistake. You've heard this before, right? 3 places, Moshe Rabbeinu becomes angry, and as a result of that anger, Moshe Rabbeinu makes a mistake. Obviously, this is one of those places. How do we know that Moshe Rabbeinu became angry here? Because if you look on page 904, what does the Torah say? Vayiksof Moshe. Moshe becomes angry. Right? Moshe becomes angry with the leaders of the army. So the Sifri is saying that what you have here is an example of Moshe becoming angry and forgetting the halacha. He made a mistake. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu told the soldiers, okay, listen, the kelim that you're bringing back are tameh, and you're tameh, and you have to go to the mikvah. But there was more that Moshe Rabbeinu should have said. What should Moshe Rabbeinu have said? He should have said, and by the way, there is a non-kosher tam, a non-kosher taste absorbed into these utensils, and here's the way in which you get rid of that non-kosher. Moshe Rabbeinu should have finished giving them all of the instructions, and he didn't. He made a mistake. Now, exactly what the mistake, does that mean he forgot? Did Moshe Rabbeinu forget, or did he make a mistake? We're going to talk about. But the simple meaning of the Sifri is Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake. Sharon.
Couldn't he just have left, he gave the country, the people the broad outlines, and he left his assistant to fill in the details.
Yeah, so that would be the opinion of that we saw earlier in the Sifri, right? That Moshe Rabbeinu said to Elazar, listen, I gave them the law, right? Moshe Rabbeinu knew the laws of kashering. It's not that he didn't know the laws of kashering, at least we'll make that assumption. But he said to Elazar, listen, you know what? They never heard you speak, right? They're not sure what you sound like, right? So you tell over the laws. Yes, exactly. That's how the Sifri would have, the other part of the Sifri would have interpreted it. That Moshe Rabbeinu said, this is a great opportunity, Elazar, for you to stand up, demonstrate your position of authority and give over these laws of kashrus. I'll deliberately not give them over and let you do it, right? Right? Your people and my people will talk and we'll have lunch together, right? Basically, that's the idea here. That could have happened.
Why not buy new pots and pans? This is like a lot of
Okay, right? Not so easy, right? Not so easy. What?
The second is the egg,
So-
the water, the third one.
All right, so what are the 3 situations where Moshe Rabbeinu became angry and as a result of that anger made a mistake? Obviously, here is number 1. Here is one of them. Not number 1, but here is one of them. Kayotze bo ata ma'omer. Similarly, we find Vayiksof el Elazar v'al Itamar b'nei Aharon hanotarim. We find another place, a second place, where Moshe Rabbeinu became angry. And who did he become angry with? Elazar and Itamar, the remaining sons of Aharon. What are we talking about here? We're talking about the death of Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu died by Yom HaShmini. We mentioned that earlier. And as a result of the death of Nadav and Avihu, Aharon, Elazar, and Itamar were transformed into mourners. And the question became, should they participate, should they partake, should they eat of the sacrifices that were being offered that day? And Moshe Rabbeinu comes and sees that they did not eat from one of those sacrifices. Which sacrifice was it? It was actually the Rosh Chodesh sacrifice. On every Rosh Chodesh, there is a Karban Chatas, a sin offering that is brought on a communal level. Why? Why would Rosh Chodesh require a sin offering on a communal level? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, every Rosh Chodesh, wants a sin offering for the diminishing of the moon. Think back to the story of Bereshis. The story of Bereshis, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the sun and the moon equally, and the moon came and complained before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and said, right, you can't have one kingdom and two kings. And what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? You're right, right? Make yourself small. Meaning, HaKadosh Baruch Hu diminished the moon, right? And even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not incorrect, it's impossible to say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was incorrect, right? What happened? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, every Rosh Chodesh, regrets having made that decision. And what is going to happen at the end of days? At the end of days, B'yemos HaMashiach, the moon is going to be restored to its original status or stature of being equal to the sun. So there's a Karban Chatas every Rosh Chodesh that's brought on behalf of the Tzibor representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Elazar and Itamar and Aharon didn't eat from that Karban Chatas. Now, whether they should eat from the Karban Chatas or not eat from that Karban Chatas, and whether they should have eaten from other Karbanos, we'll talk about, because we're going to be introduced to the laws of Avelus from what Aaron and Moshe, from what Aaron, Elazar, and Itamar did or didn't do. We're going to see that's one of the sources for the laws of Avelus, of mourning. But for the time being, we know that Moshe became angry at Elazar and Itamar for not eating of this karban. Interestingly, it's not mentioned that he became angry at Aaron, became angry at Elazar and Itamar, and Elazar and Itamar don't respond to Moshe, but Aaron responds to Moshe, and Aaron says to Moshe, you made a mistake. You thought we should be eating of it, and we shouldn't be eating of it. So the Gemara brings this as an example of a second place where Moshe became angry, and as a result of Moshe becoming angry, some kind of mistake occurred. Here, it seems Moshe made a mistake in halacha, right? Moshe thought they should have been eating from this karban, and Aharon pointed out to him that was incorrect. They should not have been eating from this karban. And we'll talk about the specifics of it, but this was a place where a mistake was made, and as a result of the mistake being made, why did it happen? Because of the Ka'as of Moshe. So we have two places. Here, where Moshe becomes angry with the commanders of the army for keeping the women alive, and Moshe makes the mistake of not telling them the laws of koshering utensils. By Yom HaShmini, where Moshe becomes angry with Elazar and Itamar, and makes the mistake of thinking they should be eating the karban when in effect they shouldn't be eating the karban. Where was the third place where Moshe Rabbeinu became angry and made a mistake?
The rock.
The rock. Says this Sifri, Kayotse bo ata omer. Similarly, we find, Vayomer alehem, Moshe said to the people, Shimu na hamorim, listen, you rebels, Hamin hasela hazeh notzi lachem mayim. Right? Are you expecting us to bring water from this rock? We know that Moshe Rabbeinu became angry, and what did he do? He hit the rock. What was he supposed to do? He was supposed to speak to the rock. A whole discussion in and of itself about whether that was a transgression for which Moshe did not get into Eretz Yisrael. What was the transgression? But that's the third place that is mentioned here as a sign of Moshe being angry. Tina, you have a question?
I think because the bit of waters that came before, Hashem said.
So these are three places. These are the three places which are mentioned by the Sifri. But there seems to be another place where Moshe Rabbeinu became angry that's not mentioned by the Sifri. And what is that? And that is when Bnei Yisrael went out on Shabbos to collect the man. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu became angry and never gave over the laws that you should collect the man, a double portion on Friday. Right? Because Moshe Rabbeinu became angry at Dasan and Aviram because they left over the man Thursday night, because what was the law? The law was that, hey, what?
Every day you have to finish.
That every day you have to finish the man. Whatever you leave over is going to spoil. And Dasan and Aviram tried to prove Moshe Rabbeinu wrong. And well, that would be a different source. Right, that would be a different source. By the way, since today is close to Lag BaOmer was the day on which the man started to fall. And we'll talk about how that what that connection was. Right, Lag BaOmer was the day when the man started to fall. We'll talk about that. But the idea is that seems to be another place. There's also possibly another place, and that is back when at the point when Bnei Yisrael first came out of Mitzrayim, they came to this place where the water was bitter, and they complained to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu became angry with them, and what happened? Kadosh Baruch said, take a rock, take the tree which is bitter, throw it into the water. And Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to give them laws there, and that didn't happen. So that might have been yet another place. We'll talk about how all of these places fit in, but according to the Sifri, the three places are here. Parsha Shmini with the inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash and hitting the rock as opposed to talking to it. Those are the three places. The Gemara similarly mentions this. Mir Hashem, as we proceed over the next couple of weeks, next week we'll talk about anger and what anger does and what does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu forgot? Did he really forget? Did he really make a mistake? How does anger work? We'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll get involved in some of these other things. Tell me.
Pinchas, at the time of Zimri, Moshe didn't speak.
Moshe Rabbeinu didn't speak there. He didn't become angry. He didn't become angry.
Wasn't his place? What was that reason that
Moshe Rabbeinu didn't speak? If you remember, we learned because Moshe Rabbeinu was afraid what was going to happen. Who was Moshe Rabbeinu married to? He was married to Tzipporah, who was from Midian, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, "I'm going to say something. What are they going to do?" He's going to say, "Who are you to tell me? You're married. Look who you're married to." So, okay, Mirz Hashem will pick up next week. Thank you all very much. Wonderful to be back, especially for this year.